Epperly, a founder and CEO who's ready to rewrite the definition of imposter syndrome. I created Who Made You the Boss to let you know that you're not alone. If you've been wondering whether your burnout is actually a sign toward evolution, or if perhaps there's something more to these challenges we face as leaders, creatives, and entrepreneurs, you're in the right place if you're looking to embrace the challenges you once perceived as negative, if you're ready to own your entire story, and if you're working to level up your business in ways you never thought possible. You'll learn all of this and more by listening in and doing the hard work you know you were meant to do. So let's get started together today on Who Made You the Boss. Given our focus on purpose in season 3 of Who Made You the Boss, we could not even begin to pursue this idea without tackling the gremlins in our way, right? The entire crux of the first 2 seasons of this show were tackling things like imposter syndrome and burnout and anxiety. And that's why today's conversation with burnout expert Cait Donovan is an absolute must listen. Whether you are currently experiencing burnout or you're in the process of recovering from it, it seems we all have a burnout journey, meaning we can all benefit from Cait's no-nonsense tips on the topic, like how ridiculous it is that we recommend gratitude journals to each other when we're in the throes of real burnout. This is one of the funniest things. I love her no-nonsense self. You're going to really fall in love with Cait's directness, just like I did on her podcast, which is Fried, the Burnout Podcast. And I also really recommend her book, The Bounce Back Ability Factor, which we also discussed in today's episode. But before we get started, we want to extend a big thank you to our friends at Belmont for making this episode and the entire season 3 of Who Made You the Boss ad-free. If you want to show your appreciation, maybe visit one of their 47 iconic hotels, go on one of their trains or their river cruises around the world for your next getaway. And if you need help planning that, make sure you reach out to my team at Jet Set World Travel. If you're loving this season of Who Made You the Boss, you might also want to consider entering the giveaway that's still open for another week. So if you're listening to this between now and October 2nd, we do have a giveaway going on to one of Belmont's awesome properties in Mexico, Casa de Sierra Nevada. You can enter that at lindsayepperly.com/giveaway. Terms and conditions do apply. And if you're listening to this after October 2nd, apologies, that giveaway is closed now. But I wanted to mention it to you because why not learn all about how we can combat burnout in a very healthy, approachable way as Cait Donovan speaks about it. And maybe at the same time, we can enter to win a trip to Mexico because that is helpful as well. All right, let's listen to Cait Donovan as she shoots it straight with us. All right, listeners, I am very, very excited to welcome my new friend, Cait Donovan, because I have long been a fan of Cait's work with Fried, the Burnout Podcast. Cait, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for saying that. It always baffles me, even though I know it's a good podcast and I know people listen to it because I see the numbers.
Yeah.
But it always is still a surprise and lovely to hear.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing because you've managed to kind of what we were talking about before recording, you've managed to turn a tough subject, one that you have firsthand experience with, or else you wouldn't have the same passion. And you've used that as rocket fuel to help others. And it's clear that you love what you do and being able to talk about burnout.
I do love what I do. And I think that burnout can be, and people who are burnt out right now are like, I hate you. But I do think that burnout can be the best thing that happens.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. And I'm not going to take us there yet. I'm going to circle back around in the conversation and camp out there because I really want to go in deep with that conversation. I think it is a really important moment in our lives that we can use to our advantage. But I want to talk a little bit about you and how you got here, right? How you're talking about burnout on a regular basis. The name of this podcast is Who Made You the Boss? And the joke is that for the entrepreneurial set, we made ourselves the boss, right? We have to like look in the mirror and deal with that every day that I made this crazy decision and now I've got to live with it and all of the fun things that come along with it. But I am just so curious, especially for you coming from a season of burnout, coming, from a totally different background. At what point did you give yourself permission to kind of step into that leadership and step into that ability? Like, how did you go about that? What did that look like for you?
When I went through my burnout recovery process and I had support, I'm not one of those people that's like, I did it by myself and now I'm helping you do it faster. No, I did not do it by myself and I don't recommend that you do either. It's not a do it. Like I am a DIY to death kind of gal. This is not the DIY scenario.
Yeah.
So I had all the support in the world, and I was going through my burnout recovery. At the time, I was an acupuncturist. And so I'm seeing, 40 to 60 patients a week. And I find myself dropping the same tidbits of information in like 38 of my 40 appointments, or 57 of my 60 appointments. And I'm thinking, like, probably should say this once where all these people can hear it at the same time.
Yeah.
Because
Is that
this
what led to
is
the podcast?
partially.
Yeah.
And so my husband made a really great recommendation that I totally ignored and should not have. And he said, because I said this to him, I said, I just keep saying the same things to people all day, every day. And he said, well, why don't you write those core things down so that you have them? And I was like, that is super smart. Probably won't do that, but a really good idea for anyone out there that's good at keeping track of notes. I'm like the girl that writes 87 Post-its and then gets overwhelmed by the fact that I have so many Post-its and then throws them all away.
You're speaking my love language.
Yeah,
this
so like I'm
organization
not.
is
I
where
can't.
I live.
Not going to happen. I will buy a special notebook for this purpose, and then I'll write grocery lists in it, and I will forget what it was for. It's just not going to happen. So I didn't do that, but I was going through my recovery process. One of the things that I noticed, which you just touched upon in a different way because of your podcast, is that the information at the time that was available in 2016 was for doctors, nurses, and corporate workers. I was none of the above. So all of these things that you are saying in this research cause burnout. They don't apply to my life. So if these things don't apply to my life, then what does? And how did I get here? I'm a stress management expert. I'm a health expert. I've meditated since I was 18. I'm an athlete. Like, I eat vegetables every day. I haven't had Coca-Cola since, 1997. Like, that's totally a lie, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. But so why am I burned out?
In that process, when I started to uncover things, what I felt internally was not that I needed to step into a leadership role. What I felt internally was people are hurting all around the world because they don't have access to information that's actually going to help them. And they don't have access to information that's going to help them, partially because some of the research has not been done yet. And partially because no one's saying it.
Yeah.
There's people that do research, right? I love them. Thank you for doing research. I'm not organized enough to do your data sheets, statistics, and I got an A in the class, but I hate it with every ounce of my being.
Yeah.
And so people who do research are not always the same people who should promote and talk about that same research. Some of them totally have both skills.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't. So I am the person who digs through academia and brings you the information that's actually going to make a difference to your recovery.
Right. So you're the vessel.
Yeah. So to me, it wasn't a leadership role. It was a calling.
Totally. Did you struggle? We talk a lot about imposter syndrome on this show. Did you struggle with imposter syndrome going through this of like, well, I'm not one of those medical professionals, or who am I to be the one
I am
talking
a medical
about?
professional.
That's true. You're acupuncturist background.
Right,
So maybe you are the right person.
Yeah. So for me, I had done an apprenticeship in life coaching in 2009. I have a master's degree in Chinese medicine. I did another degree in biobehavioral health after I moved back to the States. So I've got another degree that's basically based on how stress affects the body. In addition, I have all this life experience and cultural experience because I've lived in 4 countries and speak multiple languages. So I had a moment where I was like, I don't have a life coaching certificate because I did an apprenticeship, and I've never worked in corporate. So can I help these people? So you ask those questions, but I think there's a difference between growing into your space and having imposter syndrome. I know a lot of people deal with imposter syndrome. It's not really one of my issues. I think it's okay to stumble through the beginning when you when we first started talking, you don't have a podcast. You've never started a podcast. Are you a podcaster? Yeah. As soon as you release an episode, yes.
Yeah.
Do you feel like a podcaster? Maybe, maybe not. Yeah. Is that imposter syndrome? Or are you just learning a new role that you just actually don't know yet? So of course you feel like an imposter because you don't know what you're doing, which is normal.
Totally.
And fine.
Yes, and, I would agree with that because we always talk about, like, silencing the inner critic or what I don't talk about that, I don't like that,
Right.
I don't think it's healthy. I think
Yeah.
it's actually, like, kind of like we're about to get into about burnout, sometimes the things our society perceives as negative are actually the positives that are there to tell us, "If you're hearing this, you're doing something right?" Like, the idea of
Yeah.
imposter syndrome to me is, like, that means keep going because you're doing something new and outside of your comfort zone, so I love the take that you just had on that.
I had a podcast guest ages ago too, Nina Blackshear, who I love, who
Mm.
said, if you want to stop feeling imposter syndrome, look at what you're lying about and stop lying. And I was
Oh,
like,
cool.
oh, but that's the truth, right?
Yeah.
That's part of it too. So if you're having imposter syndrome because you're trying to sell $7,000 coaching packages to people that you've never met and you've never coached anyone before, well, no, like, no kidding.
Right, so this is just part of the process of
This
figuring
is
out, like,
part
start where you are.
Start where you
It's
are. Be
not
where you
don't
are.
start,
Right.
it's just start
Please
where you are.
start. We need the help out
Yeah.
here. Please start. Please follow what you think you should be doing and your callings and your inklings and your breadcrumbs and however whatever universal connector word you want to use
Yeah.
to get there, please do it. But if you feel like you totally own it from day one, you're missing something because you can't own something that you don't know all the pieces to.
Mm.
I I'm a professional speaker. I hang out with a lot of other professional speakers and people who are trying to become professional speakers. And one of the things that we don't understand is that becoming a professional speaker isn't about standing in front of people and speaking. It's about all of the milieu that goes along with. Like, if you don't know what a one sheet is, you're probably not a professional speaker yet.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's not a but the thing about that is people are judging that like it's a bad thing. I didn't have a one sheet for the first year that I was speaking because I didn't know what the hell it was. That you figure it out by
Right.
doing it. We I think we want to enter a new role and a new anything and just have all of the information because only then we feel ready and not imposturing.
Sometimes I wonder if this is not a byproduct from a culture of being able to, like, print our own business cards, where you can just,
Yeah.
like, print your own business card and you're going, "Well, what title should I put on the business card?" Like,
Right.
some of it is, "Well, I guess this is the title that I wanna step into, and
Yeah.
so I don't wanna put, like, amateur speaker or amateur whatever, or
Yeah.
I'm a wannabe entrepreneur." So, sometimes it's, like,
Yeah.
figuring out the fact that, like, maybe you just don't even have to title it. Like, maybe
Maybe
you
you
just
don't have
start
to
where you are.
title it, or maybe you do title it and you slowly learn the steps along the way and you understand
Yeah, and you own
that
that.
you own that.
Yeah,
I'm
I love that.
growing into a professional speaker. So yeah, I
Okay.
had moments of discomfort, but I don't think of that as it didn't hold me back.
Yeah. I was curious your take because I feel like when I think about kind of the things that affect the modern workplace, like the gremlins in our heads, right? Imposter syndrome is one, perfectionism is another, burnout is obviously one. And I think they all kind of tie into this like larger umbrella of control and
Mm,
whether or not we have it or we need it or we want it or we're in the illusion of it and all of that. So, because you are a burnout expert, I won't keep us on imposter syndrome too long. I want to talk about actual burnout and how that manifests. And I love the language that you have created around it because you talk about obviously the branding is so good when it comes to Fried the Burnout podcast. But when I hear you talk about, are you just a little bit burned out or are you extra crispy? Like that just resonates so much. So I want listeners today to kind of let's walk through this process of identifying burnout, identifying where we are. What do you feel like if you're a listener and you're going, I've kind of felt a little bit off. How do you determine if it is actually burnout? Like, what does that litmus test look like?
so first, because I'm a nerd, I always start with the World Health Organization definition because I think if we're not all at least talking about the same phenomenon,
Mm,
then we're making mistakes. Right? So
important.
let's all get to point zero. And point zero is that the World Health Organization, May 28th, 2019, decided that this is the definition of burnout. They have not updated it. I don't agree with the whole thing. However, it is what it is. Burnout has three components. The first is physical and mental exhaustion. The second is cynicism and depersonalization. And the third is a lack of impact or lack of productivity. And all three of those things need to be present within a workplace scenario in order for something to be considered burnout. It is not a diagnosis. It is not in the DSM. You're none of that. So that's where we're starting.
Okay.
The reason I think this is ridiculous is because physical and emotional exhaustion is like every single symptom that you've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where do we even begin?
Well, I'm a mother of two littles, so.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Like, are you tired? Sure, of course you are.
Are you burned out of mothering?
Which you could be.
Which you could. Yeah, that's true.
You could be. I think the other part that I disagree with is the fact that it is associated, it is currently a workplace phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. To that same point, it can be a home place situation as well.
Well, if you're working in your home, if you are a stay-at-home mother, you are working over full-time in your home.
Yeah.
That
that's
counts.
why caretaker burnout is such a high conversation
Exactly.
topic.
So that irritates me that we're still talking about like the workplace.
Okay.
And for entrepreneurs, that's a hard thing to, because who made you the boss? Like, you're the boss.
Right.
You made the rules, and now you've got to face the rules that you made.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's perfect, but at least it's defined and it's a starting point. So that's starting point number one. Starting point number two is, in order to decide if something is burnout, you need to differentiate it between burnout and stress.
Okay.
Are you just stressed? Or
Right.
has that stress taken over and lasted long enough to create significant physiological changes in your body?
Okay. What does that look like?
To me, there is a very clear line in the sand.
Okay.
When it is still just stress, you can take a vacation or even just the weekend and get some rest in. And on Monday, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't love your job, but like, you have enough energy to go do it. When you're burnt out, you can sleep for a month and you are still exhausted and nothing has improved and you have not recovered. Your body has lost its ability to bounce back.
Yes. The bounce back ability, as one might say, if they were to put out a book in the world that everyone should
As
read.
one might. Right. So if you lose this ability to recover, you're in burnout.
Okay.
That's the line.
That makes so much sense. So, Cait, what I'm very obsessed with is I think we're very focused oftentimes on burnout as like the symptom, right? Like this has happened and so I am burned out. And you touched on this earlier of burnout can be the best thing that's ever happened to you. And when I look at burnout as a sign toward evolution, because anything you do cannot recover it when it comes to the stress management side, to your point, I've found those have been the most fruitful moments in my entire professional life is when I have burned out and realized something's got to give. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about when burnout is actually a gift and how we can use that to our advantage.
Except for just skip like the first 6 to 9 months of recovery to get to the gift part.
Tell me about the recovery part, because
Right,
unlike you surrounding yourself with people, I did not. I did the DIY and it just was all a blur. So I want to hear it from a professional.
Yeah, so
How do you recover?
It is not going to feel like a gift for a very long time.
Good leveling.
It took me years.
Yeah.
And when I say years, I don't mean 6 months. I mean literal actual years of my life until I was like, oh, thank God that happened.
Yeah, that's true.
Please do not, under any circumstances, paint a silver lining on this before you are ready.
Great point. Great point.
So let's start with the fact that being burnt out is actually really terrible.
Yeah.
One of the reasons is that it's terrible is you said like recovery is as part of the stress management. I don't even mean the stress management. I mean, literally, you've lost brain cells and you need to regrow them somehow. I mean, your gut bacteria is a wreck.
Yeah.
And it needs to change because you're no longer getting nutrients from food. I mean, your muscles are atrophying and you can't exercise the way that you used to because you become so fatigued when you do it that you can barely function.
Right. So this is so akin to depression as well.
Can be that when you are someone who has a tendency toward depression, when you burn out, you will likely also be depressed. But for me, for instance, I tend toward anxiety. When I was burnt out, I was anxious as hell.
Yes.
I was not depressed.
Okay. I have multiple questions from all that you're sharing, and I want to come back to the anxiety. So, but first, I want to talk about, you know, everything you just described, the physical sensations that are happening and the way that you can't even move your own body the way that it used to. Say someone is listening and they're like, that's me, just nailed it. What is their first next step, essentially? Like, what is their move from there? What do you do?
Honestly, you will probably not get the information that you need, but the first thing I want you to do is go see your doctor and get a full physical,
Mm-hmm.
because we might find out that you are anemic
Yeah.
or that your vitamin D is in the tank. Let's deal with those things before we get to any sort of like, let's work on your mindset. If you just look at this situation differently, everything will be better, because
Yeah.
you can't do that right now. Like, you literally don't even have the capacity to do that right now.
Mm-hmm.
So first, let's physically do something for your body.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing we do in my business is called life pruning. We start to look at your life and decide what things can be taken off your plate that really won't make much of a difference at all. And as an entrepreneur, this is an extremely important exercise that you should be doing quarterly. Because when you start your own business and you wear all 37 hats, you're the marketing department and the branding department and the newsletter department and the sales department and the product department. You're every department.
Yep.
What happens over time is you implemented things in the beginning that you are now continuing to do that are no longer doing anything for your business, but you never stopped to assess whether or not you should do them anymore.
Right.
Every single business goes through this, no matter the size, the seed money, the venture capital investment, or the like side hustle that's paying for your other side hustle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how it
Mm-hmm.
happened or how big or small it is. You will have redundant practices in your business.
Yeah.
So if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening to this, it is time to look at some stuff and say, do I need this? Is
Right.
this doing anything for my business?
Everything you're saying, and this is why I think that those moments of burnout really were what helped level my business and myself up, is
Yeah.
because you do start taking inventory at that point
Yeah,
and
you have to.
realizing you do, because what got you here won't get you there. And the fact that you are completely stuck means something's got to give.
Yes.
And I think everything you're describing is so helpful, because it's 2 points of: one, what are the things we can stop doing that are redundant? But two, what are the things that we can stop doing and give to someone else, because we don't need to be the ones that are doing them. Like, that's the whole
Exactly.
point of growth and evolution. And it's
Exactly.
always so scary at the moment to think, well, I've always been the number one travel salesperson in my company. How could I possibly stop selling travel in order to build the company? Right. But it's that's necessary, because you can't keep doing it all and wearing all the hats.
Amen. Oftentimes people struggle with this process.
Mm.
This is where the resentment journal mini course comes in.
Tell me more, because the title alone of resentment journal.
When you are burnt out, the worst advice you could possibly accept from anyone is do a gratitude journal. Write down 3 things that you're really grateful for every day before you go to bed. And so you get into bed and you get your stupid little notebook and your stupid little pen to write your stupid little gratitude list. And you write family, house, food. But you're mad when you're doing it and you're annoyed that you have to do it. And then you're self-judging because you don't actually feel the gratitude that you know you should feel for these things. These are wonderful things that you have that most of the world maybe doesn't have. And so you should be great. And then you feel guilty.
Right. Right.
It's not helping you. It's like permission to throw out your gratitude journal if you're burnt out. Granted.
And build a resentment journal instead.
Get the resentment journal. The resentment journal is your lowest hanging fruit when you're burnt out.
Yeah.
You're mad. You're rageful. You want to explode at people all the time. You are full of resentment.
Mm-hmm.
We are not taught what to do with resentment. We are not taught it's acceptable. And if you are in a church community, it's like an evil emotion.
Yeah.
Like you're
Yes.
evil.
I mean, well,
if
to
you
your
have
point, that's why I
resentment.
think it's such a catchy title alone, because the
Yes.
word resentment, just, you can feel it in your gut, right? When you
Yeah.
even think about it. And then
Yeah.
you feel shame that you feel it.
But what if we could use it?
Mm-hmm.
So we look at resentment. I have people, there's a whole process. Pay attention, start writing down things you're resentful for. Then there's a question sieve. Ask these questions. You become an observer of your resentment
Mm,
instead of an experiencer of your resentment. And you say, okay, well, if this is the scenario, then what would I need to do and how would I need to act and who would I need to be in order for this to shift?
right.
What needs to happen? The results are dropping it, so that's the life pruning
Hmm.
portion, delegating it, like you said, someone else
Hmm.
can do this, upgrading a tool. So maybe you've been using Google Calendar and now you're moving to Calendly. So you don't
Hmm.
have to manage, you don't have to put in a link every time. It does it
Hmm.
automatically. And it only
Hmm.
costs you $12.99 a month. Wonderful. Like,
Yeah.
yay. And so what needs to be dropped, what needs to be delegated, what needs to be upgraded, and then what internal boundaries do I need to put into place? I'll get to back to that in a second.
Hmm.
And what external boundaries need to be put into place? Internal boundaries, folks. Your internal boundaries are how you protect your own time, energy, money, values, joy.
Mm. Okay. So what is that? What options do you have there in protecting those?
Your internal boundaries are about not overcommitting,
Hmm.
not overgiving. You don't usually have to say no yet here. Often these are just happening within yourself. You just have to stop overstepping boundaries. You have to stop meddling. You have to stop fixing things for people. You have to stop entering yourself into every equation because you think if you solve everything for everyone, they will love you. Because you've been solving things for people probably for about 30 years and they do not care. And they have not learned how to solve things for themselves.
What's so amazing to me about your approach is it feels like a cold bucket of ice water, right? Like it feels like a reality check in the face of all the fluffy, other very like
Not fluffy.
caretakey fluff on the, which is lovely, but probably
Has its
not going to do
place.
the trick against something that is fried. Whereas nice cold water absolutely will, right? Like we need a dousing of reality when we're in this place.
And we need to understand that unwinding burnout comes down to making different decisions about what's in your external world. So if you're at a
Mhm.
workplace that's exploiting you and you stay at that workplace,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That's why. And I'm going to link to this. I've shared this before in my newsletter because it was such a good episode. But the episode that you did where you talk about essentially what is an employee's responsibility and what is an employer's responsibility, I've referenced it so many times as an employer because it helps me understand, oh, here's how I can help take care of my people. But then also as a human who works for a company, even though it's my company, it's still working for a company, what can I realistically expect for my company
yeah.
to do? And to your point, if it's a workplace that's not taking those measures, that's something that you can quantify and get yourself out of if necessary.
And sometimes it takes some planning, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's annoying, and sometimes you don't get a job right away. And I'm not suggesting anybody quit tomorrow without
Yep.
any jobs lined up. I've never been in a financial position where I could just stop working. That's
Yep.
never been an option for me. So I'm not recommending it for anybody else.
Mm-mm.
But will you need to create an exit strategy? Will you need to start working on that? Should that be the only thing you're doing right now for your recovery? Yeah,
Mm.
probably.
Yeah.
If the situation is such that it is completely untenable, right?
Yeah.
But that's part of it. And then unwinding all of the reasons that you're stuck in patterns of people pleasing and perfectionism and hypervigilance and hyperindependence and all of that, unwinding those bits. If you
Mhm.
don't unwind those, you take them with you. It's really
Mhm.
hard to take
Mhm.
advantage of somebody that has good boundaries. So if you're being exploited or taking advantage of, you've got to do this part. And in
Mm.
some scenarios, it won't work. That's how you know the scenario is toxic and you got to go.
Mhm.
But you have to know where you're allowing things to come in
Mm.
before you can make those shifts. So your internal boundaries are the things that you agree with and the things that you overstep into that you're not really outwardly being asked. Like all of a sudden, you're the person that brings cupcakes for everybody's birthday because you brought them in for Sally your first year on a Tuesday. And now you're the cupcake lady and you're so mad about being the cupcake lady, but you've made up this rule that everyone expects it, so now you do it. Well,
Mm.
change the rule.
Mhm.
Don't bring the cupcakes next time. This is not a conversation you have to have with people.
Right.
You don't have to do anything.
When you talk about the people pleasing and all of this aspect, I kind of took note of what you said earlier, that in certain stages you go to a more anxious personality type and toward anxiety. And that resonates, as I do as well. And for the longest time, I was telling myself the lie that my anxiety was necessary to fuel my ambition, right? Because I had been successful on this upward trajectory of more, and a lack of contentment. And that all came from that like really weird buzzy sensation in my chest that I just said, well, that's just part of me. I guess that's just part of it. And addressing that was so monumental to getting me out of my own burnout. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that as well. Because what you're describing is really getting to know yourself and your mental health and all of the intricacies of that. Does it come with anxiety? Does it come with depression? Does it come with people pleasing? Does it is this part of the resentment journal? How do you figure that stuff out? Is this therapy?
It can be therapy. Yeah, I recommend therapy a lot.
Yeah.
And it depends on what you're facing, because to me, the anxiety is secondary to the other things. So, or really primary to the other things. Like, I'm anxious, so I people please. I'm anxious that I won't be liked, so I people please. So then the work is the same, actually, either way. When people come in and they're like, I'm a people pleaser, I can't stop it, I can't help myself, I don't know what to do. I'm like, okay, well, your job is to go disappoint one person a day this week. And they're like, I can't do it.
No way.
I'm like, you can, actually.
Yeah.
But what we think, when you start to really explore the things that you think will disappoint people and how many times you're pretzeling yourself during the day to avoid that disappointment, you start to see that it gets a little bit silly. Like, for instance, we were going for a hike recently. My husband and I get dressed, go downstairs. We get the dog in the harness. Dog is on a leash. We are opening the door. He opens the door, walks out to the car. Then I realize I have to go to the bathroom. I am fully dressed. My shoes are on. My jacket's on, but I have to go to the bathroom. 5 years ago, I would have just gotten in the car, gone for the hike, been annoyed for the whole hike. My husband would have taken a wrong left turn somewhere, because he always does. That would have added 2 miles to our hike that I didn't want to hike in the first place. And now I really don't want to hike because my bladder is about to fall out of my body. Then we get back in the car and I'm he's like, I want to stop and grab a sandwich. And I'm like, mother, no.
Yes.
Like, I need.
Yeah.
Would have destroyed our whole day.
All because you were afraid
to
say what you
say,
needed. Yeah.
I'm going to go to the bathroom. Can you wait 100 seconds for me? Because that's about how long it will take for me to go to the bathroom and put my clothes back on and wash my hands.
Right.
So when we think about disappointing people, I think people are often thinking about these massive events, but you are avoiding disappointing people in the smallest of ways all day, every day. When people open the fridge and you're already listing the food. Yeah. You not listing the food you are afraid is going to disappoint them. And they might be a little about it at first. Let me tell you, they'll get over it.
Right.
They'll get over it. So we have to, in order to quell the anxiety about being disliked by not people pleasing, we have to actively disappoint people and gather enough data that we can do that frequently enough and still be appreciated, loved, paid attention to, enjoyed, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, first of all, I feel like we can keep going for hours because this is so fascinating. And this is why you have an entire podcast where listeners, you can get so much more of Cait out of that. I want to kind of end on that point because I believe so many of us, first, you just chocked this episode already full of tangible takeaways and things that if you are feeling any level of burnout, you can start today to work toward. But the people pleasing part is where I want to end because that is something I think we need to sit with, at least by we, I mean myself, right? Asking for a friend here. I need to sit with that because as much as I feel like I have moved forward from people pleasing tendencies or that anxiety that drives it, I've never linked the two. I've never realized the anxiety was related to the anxiousness of not being liked. And where does that come in with people pleasing? That is, Cait, such good stuff. And this whole conversation has been such good stuff. Really, thank you for it. Before we wrap up, a couple more questions for you. I've mentioned fried a number of times because I'm such a fan of the podcast. how can people connect with you, follow you? What is the best next step for them to become involved in everything Cait Donovan?
The best thing is honestly to search Fried the Burnout podcast, and it will send you to all things me.
Done. Beautiful.
Done.
My last question is something I ask everyone, and it is because we do work toward cultivating gratitude. I do think that is an important part of mindset. I know we've given a lot of kind of side eye to the fluff side of things. And I agree with you that there is a really important, depending on what part of the process you're in and what season you're in, right next step when it comes to that cold dose of reality. But when we are cultivating the gratitude, as we try to do every night around the dinner table, we always ask one another, what is one thing that made you smile today? And I am curious to ask you that as my guest. What is one thing that made you smile today?
I had a new client reach out and book me for an event within a 15-minute conversation because they just experienced me at another event and they had no questions. They were like,
awesome.
Are you available? Can we pay you? And I said, yes.
Yes and yes.
Yes. And I love gratitude at the right moments. What I don't love is people trying to use it when it's not available to them. Gratitude has been shown in the research to be especially useful when there is a flood of emotions that comes with it. So if you see something and you feel awe, or you have that moment of gratitude and it just, that when it floods your body and you feel it, it's really useful then. You just can't do that when you're burnt out.
Totally. Well, that's the whole point of not pouring from an empty cup. There's nothing to flood your body in that situation. It makes perfect sense.
Your body. But when you're recovering and you get back to that and you can, stop and smell the flowers. Talk to each other about your gratitude. Find that perspective. Sure.
Yeah.
Just if you can't get it and it's in your face and it's making you feel bad about yourself, you can drop it.
Yes. Amazing permission given in this episode toward so much that we encounter as not just professionals, but as humans. Thank you so much for being on Who Made You the Boss.
Thanks for having me.
If you've gained some valuable insights from listening to Who Made You the Boss, there are 2 ways we ask our listeners to show us some love. First, share this episode with a friend who you know would benefit. The more we impact others, the more we can grow our resources to impact you. It's a win-win and it helps us a ton. Second, if you'll take a moment to leave Who Made You the Boss a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, that helps us continue create meaningful work, and it just makes our day. Thank you, listeners, for being part of this journey. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep being the boss of your own incredible story.